Welcome, brave souls, to another journey into darkness. If you value your sanity, or what's left of it, subscribe now and prepare yourself for more bone-chilling stories that haunt the night. Go ahead, hit that like button if you dare, and share this video with others who crave the unsettling touch of fear. Every like, every share, draws us deeper into the unknown. So lock your doors, dim the lights, and let the terror begin.
Whispers in the static. The faint glow of neon seeped through the blinds in Liam's small apartment, casting thin lines of light across the cluttered room. It was past midnight, his favorite time to turn on the radio and explore the airwaves. The hum of old equipment and the static-filled frequencies offered a kind of solace. To most it was just noise, but to Liam it was a chance to connect with the world in his own quiet way. Tonight, though, the static felt different. His fingers hovered over the dials, tuning with a practiced precision. He enjoyed listening to the late-night conversations of other operators, those quiet voices that shared stories and secrets over the airwaves. But now something else crackled through the static. A voice, faint and distorted. "Anne, hear me?" His breath caught. The voice was barely discernible, lost in a sea of white noise, but it sounded eerily like his name. He leaned closer to the receiver, adjusting the frequency in small increments, trying to find the sweet spot where the voice might become clearer. But as suddenly as it appeared, it faded back into the static, leaving behind only the faint hum of the radio. Liam leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Maybe it was just interference, a trick of the night air mixing signals, or even some rogue broadcast echoing from a distant storm. Yet, there was something unsettling about the way the voice seemed to know his name. Just as he was about to dismiss it, the door to his bedroom creaked open, and Emma appeared, rubbing her eyes. "You're still up?" she asked, her voice groggy. "Yeah, just picked up something weird on the radio," Liam said, gesturing toward the setup. "It sounded like someone calling my name." Emma frowned as she crossed the room to join him, glancing at the receiver. "That's creepy," she said with a shiver. "Probably just a coincidence, right?" "Probably," he replied, though he wasn't convinced. Emma reached out and gently squeezed his shoulder. "Come to bed soon, okay? Don't let the static mess with your head." "I will," he promised, even though he knew he'd be staying up a little longer. As she headed back to the bedroom, he adjusted the dials once more, his curiosity overriding any sense of caution. The next evening, as the clock crept past midnight, Liam was back at his radio setup, scanning the same frequency. Emma was asleep in the bedroom, and he kept the volume low so as not to wake her. For nearly an hour, there was nothing but the usual static and distant chatter from other operators. He was starting to think it was just a one-time oddity when a burst of static made him jump. "Find me, WXXR." The voice cut through the noise like a knife. It was a woman's voice, trembling with desperation. Liam's pulse quickened as he jotted down the letters, WXXR. He recognized them. That was an old station long since decommissioned. It had been off the air for at least 15 years, ever since the death of its last host, Eva Riley. Before he could delve deeper, a soft thud came from the bedroom. Liam's head snapped up, and he listened intently. The apartment was silent again, but something felt off. He got up and went to check on Emma, finding her still asleep but with the covers tangled around her as if she had been tossing and turning. Returning to the living room, the lights in the apartment flickered. The radio let out a sharp, high-pitched squeal, and then the room was plunged into darkness. He fumbled for his phone, its screen lighting up to reveal the unsettling stillness around him, his heart hammering in his chest. Just as suddenly, the lights snapped back on. Liam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. As he approached the radio, he noticed something even more unsettling. The dials had shifted from the frequency he had been monitoring to another one entirely. One he didn't recognize. The thought that it could have moved on its own made his skin crawl. Emma appeared at the door again, her expression concerned. "What's going on? I heard a loud noise." "I'm not sure," Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something's not right." She wrapped her arms around herself, glancing at the radio. "Maybe you should turn it off for tonight. It's probably just giving you the creeps." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, maybe." As he reached to switch off the radio, A faint voice crackled through the static, clearer than before. Liam, Emma, help. Emma's eyes widened and she took a step back. Did that thing just say my name? Liam's hand froze on the dial. Yeah, he whispered, a chill running down his spine. Over the next few nights, the occurrences grew more frequent and more unnerving. Each time Liam sat down at the radio, there was something, an odd burst of static, a faint whisper of his or Emma's name, or the same desperate voice repeating, "Find me, WXXR." Every time, Emma tried to convince him to let it go, but Liam's curiosity was quickly becoming an obsession. One night, Emma decided to sit with him. She insisted that if he was going to keep investigating this strange signal, they should face it together. As the two sat huddled over the radio, Liam began scanning the frequencies again, his hand carefully turning the dial. The apartment was silent except for the low hum of the receiver. Eva, Liam, Emma. The voice broke through the static, clearer than it had ever been. Emma's hand gripped Liam's arm tightly. "That's the name, isn't it? The host who died," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eva Riley. Liam nodded. Yes, WXXR shut down after her death. There were all kinds of rumors about what happened, but nothing was ever confirmed. Some say she died right in the studio. As they continued to listen, the voice seemed to grow closer, the static becoming less of a barrier. There was a sudden burst of noise, a screech like nails on a chalkboard, that made Emma cover her ears. The lights flickered again, and the radio cut off with a loud pop. In the darkened apartment, a cold breeze swept through, chilling them both to the bone. "Liam, please," Emma said, her voice trembling. "I don't like this. Something isn't right. It's like—" Before she could finish, the light snapped back on, and they both saw it. A symbol was scratched into the wooden surface of the desk, a jagged shape that neither of them recognized. Liam stared at it, his mind racing. "I swear that wasn't there before." Emma's face had gone pale. "We need to stop this. I don't care if it's just some prank or something else, but we need to turn that radio off for good." Reluctantly, Liam agreed, and they unplugged the radio. But as they walked back to the bedroom, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was trying to reach them wasn't finished. A few days passed without incident. Liam managed to keep himself distracted with work, and Emma seemed relieved that the disturbances had stopped. But the unease never fully left them. Late one night, as they were settling in for bed, a thud echoed from the living room. Emma bolted upright. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice tight. Liam nodded. "Stay here. I'll go check it out." He grabbed a flashlight and made his way down the hall, his pulse pounding in his ears. As he approached the living room, he could see that the radio, still unplugged, was glowing faintly. The dials were moving, shifting between frequencies with a soft clicking noise. "What the hell?" Liam muttered, stepping closer. The moment he reached the radio, the air turned icy and a voice blared through the speaker. "Leave, or she suffers." Liam felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest, as though a hand was squeezing his heart. He stumbled backward, gasping for breath. Just as quickly, the pressure released and he collapsed to his knees, panting. Emma rushed into the room, her face full of terror. "Liam, what happened?" He struggled to stand, pointing weakly at the radio. It spoke. It threatened you." Emma looked at the radio with horror, then back at Liam. "We need to get out of here, now." Liam and Emma spent the night in a hotel, but neither of them could shake the feeling of being watched. The next morning, Liam contacted an old friend, Jack, who was a fellow ham radio enthusiast and had a knack for the supernatural. Jack was skeptical at first, but agreed to meet them at a diner to discuss the situation. Over cups of coffee, Liam explained everything that had happened, the strange voice, the symbols, the threats. Jack listened with a furrowed brow. "I don't know, man," Jack said, scratching his head. "I've heard of interference and even weird pirate radio signals, but this, if you're saying the radio was on by itself and talking to you, that's not a normal signal." "It's not just the signal," Emma cut in, her voice strained. "It feels like something's following us. There's this coldness, and sometimes I feel like I can hear whispers, even when the radio's off." Jack hesitated before speaking. "There is one thing we could try. If Eva Riley was actually broadcasting something before she died, there might be a record of it. Sometimes old signals linger, and with the right setup, we might be able to replay it. Maybe there's a message in there." Emma's eyes widened. You're suggesting we in again? It's risky, Jack admitted, but it might give us some answers. If this thing is trying to communicate, it's better to know what we're dealing with. Liam glanced at Emma, seeing the fear in her eyes. But he also saw something else, a determination that mirrored his own. Let's do it, he said. But this time, we do it right. We set up protection, and we don't let whatever this is get the upper hand. That evening, Jack arrived at Liam and Emma's apartment, carrying a backpack full of equipment, old radio parts, a digital recorder, and some signal processing gear. As he set up, the air in the room seemed to grow heavier, and the faint hum of the unplugged radio could almost be felt as a low vibration beneath the floor. Jack spoke as he worked, arranging the equipment around the radio in a rough circle. If this thing's using the radio waves to communicate or travel, we need to contain it as best we can. This setup will let us isolate the frequency and capture any audio we might not hear directly. If Eva's voice is still in the signal, we'll catch it. Emma was pacing nervously while Liam stayed close to the setup, his eyes locked on the radio. And if it's not just a voice? He asked, his voice low. Then we're dealing with something far worse, Jack said, meeting Liam's gaze. Something that knows how to manipulate the signal, like it's using the radio as a doorway. They finished setting up and took their places. Jack sat in front of the recorder, while Emma and Liam stayed just outside the circle, near the apartment's entrance, ready to bolt if things went wrong. Jack gave a final nod before powering on the radio. Static filled the room, a harsh white noise that seemed to echo off the walls. Jack carefully tuned the frequency back to where Liam had first picked up the strange broadcast. As he turned the dial, there was a sudden drop in the static, and a voice emerged, clearer than ever. Eva, find me, help. The voice was unmistakable. It was a woman's, trembling with desperation and interspersed with sobs. Emma gripped Liam's hand tightly. That's her, she whispered, her breath catching in her throat. That's Eva. Jack adjusted the recorder and spoke softly. Eva, if you can hear us, tell us what happened. Why are you trying to reach Liam and Emma? For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then the voice returned, more agitated. Trapped, in the signal, must escape. Suddenly the lights flickered, and the temperature dropped. A heavy, suffocating cold filled the room. The radio's static rose in intensity, and the voice shifted, deepening into something malevolent. Leave now or suffer. Liam stumbled back, pulling Emma with him as the radio emitted a piercing screech. Jack lunged for the power switch, but before he could reach it, the radio exploded in a shower of sparks. A thick black smoke poured out from the device, swirling in the air like a living thing. The smoke condensed into a dark shape that loomed over them, vaguely human, but with twisted, elongated limbs and hollow eyes. Its voice filled the room, no longer restrained by the radio. You should not have come here. Emma screamed as the entity surged toward her, its smoky tendrils reaching out. Jack quickly pulled a metal folding chair between Emma and the entity, causing it to momentarily recoil as the metallic clang reverberated through the air. Get out now, Jack shouted. They bolted from the apartment, fleeing down the stairwell to the parking lot below. Liam's heart pounded in his ears as he fumbled with his car keys, his hands trembling. The entity's presence seemed to cling to them, its oppressive coldness trailing after them like a dark shadow. They piled into Liam's car, and he slammed the door shut, starting the engine with a shaky breath. He tore out of the parking lot, glancing in the rearview mirror. For a moment, he thought he saw the smoky figure standing by the entrance to the building, but then it was gone. Where do we go? Emma asked, her voice quavering. Someplace public, Jack said, his tone urgent. That thing is using the radio waves to follow us. We need to get somewhere with a lot of interference, somewhere it can't reach us easily. Liam nodded and headed for the city center, where the noise of cars, street lights, and other electronics might offer some kind of protection. As they drove, the radio in the car crackled to life, even though it had been switched off. The voice was back, whispering now, but no less threatening. You cannot run. You cannot hide. Emma covered her ears, trying to block out the sound. How is it doing this? We turned off the radio. Jack's face was pale as he answered. It doesn't need a physical radio anymore. It's found a way to travel through the electromagnetic waves. It's using any signal it can find to reach us. Liam tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Then how do we fight it? Jack didn't answer. For the first time, Liam saw real fear in his friend's eyes. It dawned on him that Jack didn't know how to stop it. They arrived at a busy downtown intersection, where the constant hum of the city seemed to push back the cold presence that had been pursuing them. Jack quickly got to work setting up some of his gear in the car, connecting wires to a small portable transmitter. "What are you doing?" Liam asked, his voice tight with urgency. "If that thing is using radio waves to travel, we can try to trap it in a specific frequency," Jack said. "I'm going to broadcast a high-frequency pulse, something that might disrupt its hold long enough to trap it, but we'll need to lure it out first." Emma's eyes widened. "You're saying we need to make it come after us again?" Jack nodded grimly. "We don't have much choice." As Jack finished setting up, he handed Liam the microphone. "Call it out. Get its attention, but whatever you do, don't show fear." Liam hesitated, then took a deep breath and pressed the button on the mic. "I know you're listening," he said, his voice steady. "You want me and Emma, right? Then come and get us." For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then, the entity's voice echoed through the radio, deep and mocking. "You are fools to challenge me." The temperature in the car plummeted, and the shadows around them seemed to thicken. The entity emerged once more, its smoky form manifesting just outside the window, glaring at them with hollow, glowing eyes. "Now, Jack," Liam shouted. Jack hit the switch, and the transmitter hummed to life, broadcasting a high-frequency tone that made the air vibrate. The entity recoiled, its form distorting and flickering as the pulse disrupted its connection to the physical world. The dark shape thrashed, releasing a deafening scream that rattled the windows. The tone grew louder, and the entity began to dissolve, its form collapsing inward until, with a final burst of static, it vanished completely. The silence that followed was almost as unnerving as the entity itself. Liam, Emma, and Jack sat in the car, breathing heavily. The air was still icy, but the oppressive weight had lifted. Jack slowly turned off the transmitter, and the hum died away. Did it work?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Jack nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "We disrupted it, at least. It shouldn't be able to follow us for now." As they drove back, the three of them remained on edge, glancing at every shadow and listening for even the faintest hint of static. When they returned to the apartment, they found the place undisturbed, as if nothing had happened. But Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the entity wasn't entirely gone. Just waiting for the next opportunity. In the following days, Liam and Emma decided to move, unwilling to stay in a place tainted by the experience. As they packed their belongings, Liam kept the portable transmitter close, knowing they might still need it. The radio remained silent, but every once in a while, when the world grew quiet, Liam swore he could hear faint whispers just beyond the edge of hearing. Remnants of Eva's trapped signal, or perhaps the entity, lingering in the static. In the weeks following the encounter, Liam and Emma tried to adjust to life in their new apartment on the other side of the city. The boxes were unpacked, the furniture arranged, and yet there was a persistent unease that lingered in the corners of their minds. Liam had put away the portable transmitter in a storage closet, hoping they'd never need to use it again. But late at night, when the world was quiet, he'd sometimes find himself staring at the closet door, almost expecting to hear the hum of static. Emma was struggling to sleep. Every night she would wake up at exactly 3 a.m., a sudden chill creeping over her skin. Even though she didn't hear anything unusual, it always felt as though someone, or something, was watching her. One night as they lay in bed, Emma spoke quietly, almost afraid to break the silence. "Liam, what if it's not really gone?" He turned to face her, his expression troubled. "We stopped it, Emma. Jack said it wouldn't be able to follow us after the transmitter disrupted it." "I know," she whispered. "But what if it left something behind? What if a part of it is still connected to us?" Liam reached out to take her hand. "Then we'll deal with it together," he said, trying to sound confident. "Whatever happens, we won't let it control us." But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the entity's presence was still there, hiding in the static, waiting for the right moment to strike. It wasn't long before the static came back. At first, it was subtle. a faint crackling sound that would buzz through their electronics, usually when they were least expecting it. The television would occasionally flicker with interference, and their phone calls would drop out with bursts of white noise. One evening, as Liam was sorting through some old boxes, he stumbled across an old tape recorder that Jack had left with them as a precaution. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to play back the last recording from the night of the encounter. He plugged in the recorder and hit play. For several minutes, all he heard was the muffled conversation from that night. His voice, Emma's fearful whispers, Jack's urgent instructions. Then, just before the recording ended, there was a faint voice layered in the background. A woman's voice. Help, trapped. It was Eva. Liam felt a chill run down his spine as he rewound the tape and played the last few seconds again. The voice was there, just as clear as before. Was it a residual signal, a lingering echo of what they'd experienced? Or was she still trapped somewhere, calling out for help? Liam didn't tell Emma right away. He didn't want to worry her, especially since they'd only just begun to feel somewhat safe in their new place. Instead, he called Jack to see if they could analyze the recording for any unusual patterns. Jack arrived the next day, and they played the tape back several times, filtering out the background noise. As they did, a pattern began to emerge. Eva's voice was repeating the same phrases in intervals. It wasn't just a random message, it was a broadcast, cycling over and over. "It's almost like she's stuck in a loop," Jack said, frowning, "like a broken transmission." Liam's pulse quickened. If she's still broadcasting, then that means there's still a connection to whatever was using the radio to follow us. Jack glanced at him, the concern etched on his face. "Then we need to find the source of the signal. If there's even a fragment of that entity left, it could still be trying to reach you." Liam, Emma, and Jack agreed that the only place to start looking was where it all began. WXXR, the old radio station. The building was still abandoned, standing like a forgotten relic on the outskirts of town. They'd avoided going back there ever since the first encounter, but now it seemed like the only way to end things for good. As they approached the station, a sense of dread washed over them. The building looked exactly the same, its darkened windows staring back at them like empty eyes. Jack carried a portable radio frequency scanner, while Liam brought along the old tape recorder, hoping to amplify Eva's signal if it was still present. Emma stayed close to Liam, her eyes darting to every shadow and darkened corner. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the scent of mildew hung heavy. They made their way to the old broadcasting room, where Liam had first heard Eva's voice. The equipment was still there, covered in a layer of grime, but intact. As Jack set up the scanner, a low buzz filled the air, growing louder with every passing second. It wasn't long before the static returned, flooding the room with a familiar crackle. "Eva," Liam called out, holding the recorder close. "If you're still here, we're going to help you. Just tell us what to do." The static wavered, and for a moment the voice came through, clearer than it had ever been. "Liam? Emma? It's coming." Suddenly the lights in the room flickered and dimmed. The oppressive cold they had felt before was back, but stronger this time, as if the entity had never really left. The shadows seemed to stretch, converging into a single mass that rose from the floor, forming the same dark shape they had encountered weeks ago. "You should have stayed away," the entity hissed, its voice resonating through the walls. "You belong to me now." Jack scrambled to adjust the frequency scanner, hoping to disrupt the entity's connection to the physical world as they had done before. "We need to trap it in a closed loop," he shouted. "If we can isolate the signal, we might be able to cut it off permanently." But the entity was faster this time, lashing out with a smoky tendril that knocked Jack to the ground. Emma grabbed the tape recorder and hit play, broadcasting Eva's last recorded message on a loop. The room vibrated as the entity recoiled, seemingly affected by the repeated broadcast. Liam rushed to help Jack to his feet, then grabbed the portable transmitter from Jack's bag. If they could broadcast Eva's loop message over a powerful enough frequency, maybe it could sever the entity's hold. Jack quickly set up the transmitter, his hands shaking. "We'll need to sync it with the original broadcasting equipment. If we can amplify it using the station's main console, it might be strong enough to break the connection." Liam and Jack connected the transmitter to the old equipment, while Emma kept the tape recorder running. The entity's shape began to waver and distort, its form dissolving in and out of focus as if it was struggling to stay anchored. Liam hit the main switch, and the old broadcasting equipment roared to life, amplifying Eva's voice. "Help! Trapped! Find me!" The entity screamed, its shape collapsing inward as the broadcast grew louder, forcing it back. The air crackled with energy, and the lights flickered one last time before the room was plunged into total darkness. For a moment there was nothing but silence. Then, as the equipment powered down, Liam heard it. A faint whisper in the static, not of malice, but of relief. "Thank you." Weeks later, the WXXR station was demolished, its broken equipment and haunted history buried beneath layers of concrete. Liam, Emma, and Jack knew they'd done everything they could to sever the entity's connection to the world. But as they settled back into their lives, the experiences still haunted them. Liam kept the old tape recorder as a reminder of what they had faced, though he never played the final recording again. He preferred to leave the past buried. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, Liam would still hear faint traces of static on the edge of his hearing. It was subtle, barely there, but it was enough to remind him that some things never completely vanish. He knew that Eva's voice would always linger somewhere out there, caught in the infinite loop of the airwaves, a reminder of the dangers that lurk just beyond the static. And he knew that if the whispers ever returned, he would be ready.